Welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining. We're going to give folks a few more minutes to log on and we'll get started shortly. Welcome everyone. Before we get started, let's be sure everyone is able to select their language channel. The options available for this session are English, Spanish, or original audio if you would like to hear the audio without interpretation. For people connecting through a computer, you can choose your language channel by selecting the More option, then Interpretation, then select your language from the available options. With much gratitude to our interpreters today, Claudia, Rhonda, and Paul. We also have live captioning available that can be accessed by clicking on the Multimedia Viewer box on the right of your screen. Now we will begin. Hello and thank you for joining us today for the fourth session in our series, Accessible, Culturally Responsive, and Trauma-Informed Advocacy Across the Lifespan. My name is Gabriela Zapata Alma. I use they, them pronouns, and I am the Associate Director of the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. It is my pleasure to co-present our session today, Grounding Our Advocacy in Equity Through Holistic Perspectives on Positive and Adverse Childhood Experiences, with Erica Trimnell, Founder and Executive Director of Prism Light. Now for some troubleshooting tips about this platform. If you get disconnected from today's session at any point, please re-enter the session using the original webinar link that was emailed to you. If the sound is unclear, it's likely due to an unstable internet connection. If this happens to you, feel free to call in for a better audio connection. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, you can directly chat Carla Alegria, Project Manager with our center, for assistance. If you're unable to contact Carla, please reach out to WebEx Tech Support. Carla will post that phone number in the chat box. We welcome you to use the chat feature to share thoughts, questions, and resources throughout the session. Your screen may look a little different depending on what kind of device you're using. Usually the chat box can be found at the bottom right of the screen. You may have to click on the chat icon that looks like a speech bubble to open it. Let's test the chat feature now. Please introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you are joining us from today. Excellent. I see folks are finding the chat. Welcome, welcome. Our center is headquartered in Chicago, the unceded homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi nations. We invite each person to learn about the land you are connected to. One resource to get started is the website native-land.ca. I will now welcome Erica to the virtual stage to open our space.
Thank you so much, Gabriella. I am honored to be here with you all today. So I would like to start with an inner child meditation. So as we begin, I invite you to find a comfortable position. May it be laying down, seated, with your eyes open or closed, whichever is most comfortable and safe for you. Take this time to connect with yourself. Perhaps taking a deep breath in, and as you exhale, feel your body relaxing and letting go of any tension. Now, I invite you to imagine that you are in a safe and peaceful place, surrounded maybe by nature's soothing energy. Perhaps you might be sitting on a soft blanket under the shade of a majestic tree, on a warm, sandy beach, feeling the gentle breeze caress your skin. Or perhaps you are in a cozy, comfortable room with soft light and a fire. You are surrounded by all the things that make you feel safe and secure. I invite you to take a few moments and look around. Notice any textures, colors, sounds, smells. Allow this peaceful place to be a source of comfort and healing to you. A place where you can connect with your emotions, your feelings, and nurture your inner child with love and compassion. And when you're ready, I invite you to turn your attention to the small child playing in the distance, your inner child. They are so happy to see you and spend time with you. Take this time and connect with them, letting them know that you are here for them, that you love them, and that you want to support them. As you connect with your inner child, you might notice emotions or feelings that arise. Remember to be gentle and compassionate with yourself, and listen to your inner child with curiosity, wonder, and understanding. And know that at any point, if you feel overwhelmed or uncomfortable by this meditation, take a break or make any necessary adjustments so you can feel safe and comfortable. Now, if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes, taking a deep breath in, And this time, as you exhale, visualize yourself sending love and light to your inner child. Imagine that this love and light is healing energy that fills the child with warmth, comfort, and security. You have the power to heal and grow from past hurts and trauma. And if appropriate, feel free to let go of any resistance and fear and open yourself up to the possibility of transformation. I offer this affirmation of encouragement for you taking this time to connect with your inner child. Feel free to repeat it to yourself. I am too full of life to be half love. Stay here for a moment, feeling the love and the light, connecting with your inner child. Perhaps you make it an immersive experiencing, noticing the sounds, the giggles of your inner child. And when you are ready, gently release your inner child. Take a moment to appreciate the beauty and innocence of your inner child and the courage it took to connect with them. Let them know you'll be back, that you will come and visit them often to play, to love them, and to support them. See your inner child smile and feel the joy and happiness. Take one last deep breath in, and this time as you exhale, gently open your eyes. Remember that your inner child is always with you, and you can connect with them anytime you like. You have the power to explore your inner world and heal from past hurt and cultivate a sense of compassion and empowerment. Thank you for joining me on this journey. May you continue to grow and thrive in love and compassion.
Thank you, Erica. That's lovely. So I'm going to go ahead now that we have opened our space and share our slides. All right. So this is just some information on the National Center and some of the things that we offer. And I'll invite Erica to tell us about Prism Light.
Yes, thank you. So Prism Light is a nonprofit here in the Charlotte area, and we are focused on creating environments that support the whole child through building community resilience to prevent and mitigate adverse outcomes of childhood trauma. We foster this through an equity lens using a cross-sector and multi-level collaboration among community stakeholders and key politicians. Prism Light is an organization that is trauma-informed, using families, businesses, faith-based centers, and communities to build resilience by centering their worth. We provide trauma-informed programming so that people who have experienced significant adversity can heal from those traumas. We work with families, businesses, and communities to prevent the cycle of childhood trauma by teaching them skills that they need to be healthy, safe, secure, and whole. We believe that adults serve as a means of capacity building for the network and support for the 1 in 4 children who have experienced childhood trauma. As we gather here today, we acknowledge that adverse childhood experiences has affected countless individuals. This has led to far-reaching impacts on physical and mental health, substance misuse, and relationships. We carry with us our own experiences of pain and trauma, as well as experience of resilience and hope. To address the broader systemic issues that contribute to ACEs and support the unique needs of individuals and communities impacted by historical trauma, we must ground ourselves in trauma-informed, accessible, and culturally responsive approach, working towards healing and promoting resilience for all. There is a 2015 study spearheaded by the Philadelphia ACE Task Force Research Group that highlighted the demographic characteristics such as gender, race, poverty are associated with higher exposure of community-level ACEs, which may be underreported using only the household-level indicators. This demonstrates the need to expand ACE assessment to include community indicators, allowing for a more comprehensive understanding of childhood adversity within our communities, especially those among diverse populations. During the session, we will dive into the 4 realms of ACEs, adopted from the Smart Start Building Healthy and Resilient Communities across North Carolina, their landscape analysis, including household trauma, community, climate, and culture. We will also discuss the importance of positive childhood experience and the need for harm reduction strategies to support individuals and communities in their healing journeys. Let's work together towards creating a healthy and resilient community for all. Next slide. The home is often seen as a haven for child's growth and development. But sadly, it can also be a place of suffering and trauma. The experiences that occur within the household during a childhood can shape a person's life for the better or the worse. In fact, research has shown that childhood abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction are major risk factors for ACEs. The original 1995 ACEs study identified 10 types of childhood trauma, including physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, neglect, and household dysfunction such as parental separation or divorce, domestic violence, substance misuse. These experiences can have a profound and long-lasting effect on a person's health, well-being, and overall quality of life. The original ACEs study was groundbreaking in that it revealed the link between ACEs and a range of negative health outcomes and risk behaviors. These include heart and liver disease, mental health issues, obesity, substance misuse, teen pregnancy, and impaired brain development. This study has absolutely revolutionized our understanding of the impact of childhood trauma on people's lives and has inspired public health community to take action. However, we must also acknowledge an important limitation of the original ACEs study. It primarily focused on middle to upper middle class participants who were predominantly white and well educated. This means that the experience of marginalized communities and individuals may have been overlooked. We must work to ensure that their voices and experiences are heard and accounted for in our efforts to prevent and address ACEs. As advocates, allies, partners, and survivors, we possess a distinct viewpoint that enables us to strive towards a future where every child can flourish in a safe and nurturing environment, unencumbered by the trauma and adversity that can have long-term and detrimental consequences. Let us continue to ground ourselves in our journey to raise awareness, advocate, and promote culturally responsive and equitable healing. Next slide. Grounding in the understanding and awareness of community experience is essential as it impacts both communities and individuals, thereby affecting us all. When individuals grow up in communities marked by poverty, food deserts, violence, and social exclusion, they are at risk of experiencing ACEs that can have the long-term and devastating effects, not only on their physical health, mental health, but emotional well-being and economic stability. Our second realm of ACEs is adverse community experience. We acknowledge that communities are not inherently dysfunctional, but rather shaped by the systemic issues that contribute to ACEs. Communities are shaped by issues such as lack of resources, social inequality, and systematic discrimination are more likely to have a higher prevalence of ACEs. Adverse community experiences and collective trauma stem from systemic forces that perpetuate harmful structures impacting the health of the community and its residents. Systems of trauma-organized system include the lack of coordination among communities and agencies that support their residents, complex and disjointed intake processes that require clients to repeatedly be assessed by various providers, competitive relationships between these similar agencies, and partners who are serving similar populations and have the lack of understanding of how the work of other partners is organized. You see, it is vital to recognize the far-reaching impacts of ACEs and adverse community experience and their potential to negatively affect not only individuals, but entire community and systems. By acknowledging and understanding this impact, we can take significant steps towards promoting resilience and well-being. We can work towards creating systemic change that addresses the root causes of ACEs. And I believe by empowering communities to understand the context of their trauma and promoting resilience, we can take a vital step towards fostering an environment where all individuals, especially those who have experienced or witnessed violence, abuse, can heal and thrive. By supporting communities in developing a deeper understanding of their experience and how to overcome them, we can help individuals and families heal and move forward towards a brighter future. Together, let us continue to work towards creating systemic change that addresses the impact of ACEs on our communities and individuals, promoting healing and creating a future free of devastating impacts of trauma and adversity in our communities. Next slide. Adverse climate experience have significant impact on community, household, and individual conditions, affecting everything from public health to economic stability. The impact of climate change, including natural disasters such as wildfires, droughts, hurricanes, earthquakes, and flood, disproportionately affect vulnerable populations, leading to further trauma and health impacts. Moreover, environmental injustice and pollution can exacerbate the impact of climate change, leading to an even more severe adverse experience. Our third realm, adverse climate experience, which have led to trauma and stress for both individuals and communities. Climate change has given rise to a range of negative impacts, including natural disasters, environmental degradation that have disproportionately affected our vulnerable populations. A trauma-informed approach recognizes the intersectionality of climate trauma, household trauma, community and historical trauma, and the systems that interact with social and political identities to create different modes of discrimination and privilege. It is important to recognize that individuals and communities are not identified by a single factor, but rather by the interplay of multiple factors that can create advantages and disadvantages. Natural disasters and other climate events are a reality for many communities around the world, exacerbating existing levels of adversity and collective trauma. For example, Puerto Rico was devastated by Hurricane Maria in 2017, and with severe damage to the island's infrastructure, leading to a loss of power and access to essential resources. The effects of the hurricane were particularly devastating for vulnerable populations, including low-income communities and those with pre-existing health conditions. Research indicates that trauma and mental health are closely linked to environmental factors such as climate change and the global crisis like the pandemic. Understanding these connections is essential for addressing the impact of trauma and promoting resilience. To address the impact of adverse climate experience, we need a comprehensive approach that considers the interconnectedness of environmental, social, and economic factors. By taking a trauma-informed approach to climate change, we can promote resilience and support communities in overcoming the trauma and adversity that have these pervasive effects on individuals, families, and communities. Next slide. Our fourth and final realm is adverse cultural experience. From examining collective trauma, we have come to understand the concept of cultural trauma, and it's created a new category of trauma. Historical cultural trauma refers to the atrocities such as slavery, genocide, colonization, forced family separation, and other human rights violations that continue to shape the development of children and their families for generations. Recognizing these experiences and the potential internal oppression that results, acknowledge the intergenerational and cultural transmission of trauma, also recognized by blood memory among individuals and entire populations. The understanding of collective and cultural trauma reveals additional levels of adversity that impact individuals and community. In the context of cultural and collective trauma, it is troubling to see how individuals can prioritize their own worldview over the ability of others to simply exist in this world. By pathologizing people rather than acknowledging the pathological nature of the process, we are perpetuating the cycle of harm and trauma for individuals and community. And perhaps if our perspective was rooted in the impacts of cultural and collective trauma, we would understand the broader dynamics at play here. For example, if we were to call it a response of trauma of genocide, it forces us to confront the deeper societal issues that contribute to this cycle of harm. It also prompts us to question who is truly sick. Is it the individual experiencing the symptoms, or is it the society perpetuating the trauma? To fully address the impacts of adverse cultural experience, we must approach these issues with cultural humility and respect for the diverse experiences and perspectives of all, including and often overlooked the underserved population like the First Nation communities. This requires acknowledging the complex interplay of historical and cultural trauma that has been endured by individuals and communities and larger systems. This includes the impacts of colonization, forced relocation, and cultural suppression. Adverse cultural experiences can manifest as intergenerational trauma, loss of language, cultural identity, and systemic discrimination with profound and far-reaching impacts of the well-being of the affected individuals and community. A comprehensive approach that recognizes, again, the intersectionality of trauma and adversity and prioritizes the unique needs perspectives of all communities is absolutely necessary. In this approach, it recognizes the importance of cultural practice and ancestral healing traditions in promoting resilience and well-being. It also prioritizes culturally responsive solutions that empower communities and promote self-determination. By recognizing and addressing the root causes of adversity, we can create more equitable and resilient communities that promote healing and well-being for all individuals, families, and communities impacted by trauma. Next slide. Adverse childhood experience can have a pervasive and enduring impacts on individuals and communities, much like deeply rooted tree in the earth. The tree represents the individual impacted by ACEs, and the roots, the branches, and the leaves represent the broader systemic issues that contribute to trauma and dysfunction. The branches of the trees represent the impact of ACEs within the individual household, the visible signs of trauma that can manifest as physical, emotional, or behavioral symptoms. These branches can grow and extend to impact the health and well-being of the entire tree, much like the impacts of trauma can extend beyond the individual household. The roots of the tree represent the broader systemic issues that contribute to the trauma and dysfunction within our communities. These roots are the foundation upon which the tree grows, and they provide nourishment and support for the entire tree. But when the soil in which the tree is rooted is polluted, the tree can suffer, just as an individual and communities impacted by ACEs can suffer when systemic issues go unaddressed. The soil in which the tree is rooted represents the cultural trauma that can impact individuals and communities. Just as the soil in which a tree is rooted impacts its growth and health, when the soil is healthy and nourishing, the tree can thrive, just as individuals and communities can thrive when cultural responsive and equity is promoted. Finally, the climate. The climate in which the tree grows represents the broader environmental factors that can impact individuals and communities. Much like the climate can impact the health and growth of a tree, when the climate is hostile, the tree can suffer, just as individuals and communities can suffer when they are exposed to chronic stressors and adverse environmental conditions. To promote healing and resilience for individuals and communities impacted by ACEs, we must start by recognizing the intersectionality of all of the realms of trauma and promote a trauma-informed, accessible, and culturally responsive approach. We must work together to nourish the soul and provide the necessary resources and support to help individuals and communities impacted by ACEs so that they may grow strong and resilient too. As we work towards promoting healing and resilience, we must also recognize the importance of addressing the broader systemic issues that contribute to trauma and dysfunction within our communities, climates, and cultures. Just as a tree is impacted by its environment, individuals and communities impacted by ACEs are impacted by their environment, including historical and systemic oppression and marginalization. Let us embark on a collective journey towards nourishing our roots and cultivating resilience. As we move beyond the limiting, harmful, victim blaming, and pathologizing frameworks that have hindered our progress thus far, let us challenge ourselves to not only focus on the individual, but also on the broader systemic issues that contribute to trauma and dysfunction. With a holistic approach, we aim to promote healing and foster resilience for all individuals and communities affected by ACEs. This journey requires courage, empathy, and a willingness to challenge the status quo. But most importantly, this journey is deeply grounded in meaningful transformation. It is a journey that has the potential to create sustainable change and promote equity, healing, and growth. And I will leave you with this quote. In healing from our traumas, we uncover the true depth of our resilience, the power of our connections, and the beauty of our collective strength. Thank you.
Thank you, Erica. Beautiful. Thank you for opening our eyes to all the different ways that we experience adversity and the ways that they're interconnected. And as you have pointed out, it is so incredibly important that we move beyond individualistic views, that we are now almost 30 years into learning about ACEs. And it's time for us to be able to step back and look at all these different realms, as well as bind together in changing these realities. It makes me think about how trees in a forest will share nutrients with one another and communicate with one another. And so as we grow our awareness, we also bind together and share those resources and messages to be able to cultivate something new,
Yes,
cultivate that healing environment.
absolutely.
So in cultivating that healing environment, we also want to look at positive childhood experiences to both stop and transform the harm while also layering in all of the richness, all that feeds us and protects us, all of the antidotes. And so, a much younger area of study is these looking at these positive childhood experiences. We're still learning a lot here, but there is an article that has put together 4 common areas of positive childhood experiences. First, being in nurturing, supportive relationships. And I want to invite everyone to share in the chat, how are you in your programs cultivating an environment of nurturing and supportive relationships for the survivors who come through your programs, their families, as well as amongst staff within your organizations, knowing that our organizations are also cultures and environments that require all of the same richness, that require all of the same protection and relationship building. So, how do you cultivate being in nurturing and supportive relationships? Second, living, developing, playing, and learning in safe, stable, protective, and equitable environments, right? The equity is not an afterthought. The equity is something that is woven throughout that safety, that stability, that protection. And again, inviting everyone to put in the chat, how do you include this in your programs and with one another? Third, having opportunities for constructive social engagement and connectedness. Sometimes we think that, programming the movie night and popping some popcorn and having some board games out, sometimes we think that that's like the extra thing or the fluffy thing, but actually it's really core to the work. It's really core to the work of healing, of community building, which is an incredibly important part of healing. And so again, inviting folks to share, how do you build in opportunities for constructive social engagement and connectedness in your programs and with one another? And then the fourth and final category that's been defined at this point is the opportunity to learn social and emotional competencies. And this can show up in a lot of different ways. Some of the ways that we talk about is modeling, is co-regulation, is opportunities for connection and interpersonal feedback, is grace and empathy. And so I wanted to share one survey that people have put together as part of a study that they were doing. And so while there isn't just like one established positive childhood experience survey, I did want to share some of the elements from this one survey so that people can get a sense of what some of these positive childhood experiences can look like. And before I share some of these, I also want to name that while we're talking about these being positive childhood experiences, knowing that even into our adulthood, we still have attachment needs, relational needs, and we still carry our inner child with us. And that so much of what we do can be healing for our inner child without even realizing it. And so while these are focused on childhood experiences, really, these are important throughout our lives. And so this specific survey came from Bethel and al.'s 2019 study that looked at positive childhood experiences and adult mental health and relational health. So some of the different things that they were looking at were whether during childhood, how much or how often a person felt able to talk with their family about their feelings, how much they felt that their family stood by them during difficult times, right? That they could fall back on family, that family was on their side. Um, whether people enjoyed participating in community events, whether people felt supported by friends, what that looked like, whether people had at least two non-parent adults who took a genuine interest in them, and whether people felt safe and protected by at least one parent in their household. And so many times there are all kinds of factors that are barriers to positive childhood experiences. And yet when we're working with survivors and their children and their families, we have a really unique opportunity to cultivate environments that help overcome these barriers and create new opportunities to experience these positive childhood experiences. And I'd love to continue hearing in the chat how folks build this into their program. I think that our learning is so enriched when we can learn from one another. And then also sharing what are some protective factors when it comes to trauma prevention? Because all of us in our lives will experience adversity and stress in one way or another. And so, given that that's a reality, how can we help shore up those protective factors to help minimize the risk of some of those long-term adverse effects? And so there are a lot of different things that come into play here, but there are four core components that have been found to be really protective when it comes to preventing the experience of trauma. First, a positive connection with a caregiver. A positive connection with a caregiver has a lifelong protective effect. And a lot of times there may have been strife, there may have been separation. We know that within domestic violence. A core tactic of abuse is threatening parent-child attachment. And at the same time, parent-child attachment is one of the most protected things. And so we're in a really unique position to be able to counter that abuse and support that parent-child attachment and caregiver-child connection. Second, socioeconomic stability. Socioeconomic stability has been found to be incredibly protective. In the studies that Erica mentioned around the Philadelphia ACEs task force that was looking at really pioneering and studying community level ACEs, it was found that when people were experiencing poverty alongside those other community ACEs, the adverse effects were so much more dire. And so socioeconomic stability is incredibly protective. And this really clarifies what we know all along, that poverty is violence. Poverty is human-made. Poverty is violence. And within our anti-violence work, addressing poverty is first and center many times. Of course, always following a survivor's lead and knowing that a survivor is the only one who knows what is most important and what is most possible in this time. But that economic stability is so protective for trauma as well as that ongoing abuse. And so often economic abuse is a part of the pattern for domestic violence. Third, access to medical and mental health care. And when we say access, we mean access, real and true access. We mean that you can get in to see an appointment with a provider who is culturally responsive, who is trauma informed, right? What we don't mean is a wait list that makes it impossible. What we don't mean is a copay or a deductible that makes it impossible, right? So when we say access, we mean real and true access to medical and mental health care. Of course, always following a survivor's lead, because we also know that it can be hard sometimes, that sometimes some of the effects of trauma can make it difficult to access medical or mental health care, or that mental health providers, medical providers might not be aware of domestic violence and the effects of trauma. And so that cross-training and that collaboration is so incredibly important so that there can be safe and effective access if and when a survivor chooses to access. And fourth, social support. Again, thinking about how an all too common tactic of domestic violence is isolation. And so thinking about the power of community, that community is so incredibly protective that in order to harm someone, they're isolated from their community. And everything that we do to help reestablish those connections and strengthen and expand those connections, both within our program as well as with the broader community. Again, inviting everyone to share in the chat, what are some ways that you already support these protective factors, as well as what ideas are coming to mind for you as you think about what are some things that you could do, or what are some areas you want to focus on as you look to enhance some of these areas. So our final question for you to reflect on now and ongoing is, what do we need? What do we collectively need ourselves and in our programs, in our communities? What do we need in order to show up in ways that center equity and healing? Feel free to reflect on that now and enter anything that you're thinking about in the chat, as well as feel free to come back to this and continue reflecting on this question. We all want to center healing and equity. What makes it hard? What do we need to be able to show up and center equity and healing? So now we want to invite folks to gather their questions and start putting their questions in the chat. As you come up with your questions and start putting them in the chat, we want to say thank you, as well as share our contact information, as well as some resources and some ways to continue connecting. So on our website, you'll find a whole lot of different resources that can help with the different positive childhood experiences and protective factors, as well as help mitigate some of those trauma risks and childhood adversities. Here you see our suite of materials around becoming accessible, culturally responsive, and trauma-informed organizations. And we also have some materials around supporting parents, caregivers, and their families. So now I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. Let's see. And open it up for questions. All right. So I see here, can you go back to Erica's info? So everyone will receive a copy of the slides as a follow-up. And so you will absolutely have Erica's info. And Erica, I also welcome you to put it in the chat now if you want to. I also have a bunch of questions coming through for you, so I'll give you a moment. I see you're typing it in the chat. Yes. So the slides will be available as well as the recording in English and in Spanish, and with American Sign Language interpretation. All of that will be available. So here I see, would school shootings and threats of school shootings fall under the adverse community experiences?
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's something that you could even say with how, unfortunately pervasive school shootings have been in our country, that it could even start to be on the cultural experience, right? If we think about the epigenetics of trauma. So these kids and, even adults who have been through that, if you were a teacher in a classroom, or a student in a classroom when, there's a school shooting, you carry that with you. And so at some point it will be not just community, but it'll also be culture. It'll be in the culture.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Erica. I couldn't agree more. There's a lot that needs to be done there.
Oh, yeah. I can go on about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I see here in the chat, someone shares, a lot of the factors that you mentioned that contribute to domestic violence are simply factors that occur because of racism. If we figure out how to create equity within our communities, we can then begin to work on some of the factors that contribute to domestic violence and childhood trauma, etc. And I want to say absolutely
Yeah.
that violence on the structural level is what creates opportunities for violence on the interpersonal
Mhm.
level. Racism, sexism, transphobia, right? All of it. That when society decides these people hold more value than those people,
Yeah.
then that creates the violence that we experience on the individual level. And so ending domestic violence, ending childhood trauma requires us to end that systemic violence as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It for me, it makes me think like this was learned, right? We didn't wake up, generally, we didn't wake up one day, right? And all of a sudden I feel like I want to do all these things to people. I want to ensue violence. And we think about how our system is designed from the, hierarchical standpoint, right? Like you mentioned, right? Some people are better, and so therefore I get to treat you less than you are. I get to decide your worth is less than mine because I'm putting myself above you. And, when you can disassociate, you can treat anyone kind of in any kind of way. And that that is in our culture. It is a toxic culture where we keep the cycle of harm, and then we blame the victims, and we blame them when they go to harm reduction strategies like alcohol or substances or risky sexual behavior without asking, what's the story behind that? What made you choose those avenues? So absolutely.
Yes. Mhm. So we have time for another question or two in case anything's coming up. I'm not seeing anything come through, so I'm going to start our wrap up. But if I see a question pop up, I'll pause and we'll take that question. So, in wrapping up, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you, Erica. Thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your incredibly valuable work and your brilliance with us. I have learned so much. I'm looking in the chat. Folks have learned so much. We really hope that everyone takes this in, checks out Prism Light, follow Prism Light on all the platforms, all that good stuff. I want to thank our interpreters, Claudia, Paul, Rhonda. Thank you so much. I want to thank Carla, Sarah, and Tamar for making sure that everything ran smoothly. And I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We know how hard it is to take the time to get away, and yet we are so, so grateful that you are able to join us and to take this moment to reflect. And we know that these moments of reflection are really important for being able to offer the best possible services. So we're so glad that you were able to make it today, and so grateful that you were taking the time to invest in yourselves, because all of that is incredibly important for the survivors that we serve and their families. And most importantly, thank you so much for what you do every day on behalf of survivors and their families. You will receive a follow-up email. You will receive slides and a link to the webinar recording. You'll also receive access to a survey, and we ask you to fill out that survey to let us know how we're doing, as well as what else you'd like to learn about or hear about from us. So thank you so much. We hope that you have a great rest of your day, and please join us for this series in May. We will be focused on cultivating safety through pod mapping in honor of Mental Health Awareness Month. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.